My name's Emily and I am an interior architect. The difference between an architect and an interior architect is an architect looks at the outside of a building and looks from the outside in, and we basically go from the inside out. So we'll take a project that an architect started and make sure the spatial flow of the building works, and we'll make sure that the inside layout works and take it right down to furniture to the end. So I knew I wanted to go into a creative job. That was something I knew from a very young age, and I enjoyed sort of textiles and art and all of those subjects at school. So I think for me, the point where it helped me to refine what that creative industry might look like was doing an art foundation straight after finishing my A-levels, because that gave me an opportunity to try out, you know, fashion and art and all of those areas that I already knew I enjoyed, but it also opened my eyes to more architectural kind of industries and what that might look like. And that's the point where I realised actually I could see myself with a career in that, and went on to study interior and spatial design. And then that has led me into the job where I am now, where I started as an intern. And actually have just stayed there and seen my career progress over the last 6 years there. A design ability is obviously a must, and so most companies would ask for at least a design degree, and most would prefer some sort of architectural or interior design degree or qualification, but a lot of companies are also taking people in at sort of the intern apprentice level, because it's very much a job that is learned on the job. So computer programs and things are needed, but a lot of the experience with build materials and site knowledge and all of that is something that you learn whilst working, not in advance. That was optional, but for me it was a really good way of kind of testing out all the disciplines that the creative industries offer and actually seeing where I could use my skill set the best. And I combined my other sort of knowledge from A-level and my maths experience, and that sort of problem solving made me realise that I was slightly more suited to the architectural route. And I think that year allowed me to experiment and try all those things. So I think it was really important as a personal journey rather than a requirement. So I work in a high-end residential. So the projects are of a certain level and the clients expect a certain standard of professionalism and work. And so I think one thing that's really important is the ability to multitask, think on your feet and just go with it, because it's not a linear process. My day is never linear. It never starts and finishes how I thought it was going to be. And so I think that ability to be flexible and just go with where it goes and run with it is really important, because otherwise it's really overwhelming. And I think creative people, thankfully, don't think in a linear way, and actually I think that's something that's really helped me to keep calm and just keep getting my job done well. The most important piece of software to use is a program called AutoCAD. That's where all the technical drawings are done and builds the kind of foundation of our job and what we do as a company. And then on top of that, there would be programs like SketchUp, which helps with modelling and 3D sort of space planning, and that's an amazing program to be able to use. And then any of the kind of Adobe Suite, Photoshop, Illustrator, it's all visual tools that help us convey our ideas and the design to the client to get it signed off. And then just specifically to my industry rather than general architecture, there's also sort of budgeting software which helps you manage the costing of a project, the costing of the furniture, create invoices, creates spreadsheets, and it's all sort of automated. And that's something that I didn't know before working where I am, and I've had training in it and use that every day now. So that's a really important piece of software. AutoCAD and sort of Adobe, Photoshop, Illustrator, those sort of programs, you get basic training at university. And I think that's dependent on the course and the university you go to, depends how much time is given to that. But yeah, you do get taught quite a lot whilst there. But I think with AutoCAD in particular, the minute you get on a live project and you're actually designing a real building and you've got input from an architect and input from the builder, and those lines on that technical drawing suddenly start to mean a lot more, and that's when the program, and you can start to use it in the way it's meant to be used for, and it stops becoming just lines on a page and starts to become a tool for creating this amazing space. So you do get taught it, but I think you really learn to maximize it once you begin working in those projects are a real life building. I think with a lot of creative jobs, the way in the beginning is always through internships, and I would recommend anyone thinking of going into any form of creative job to try and do as many of them before finishing as possible, so that when you go to graduating, you've already got that build-up of experience, because no one's going to offer you any sort of role without that. If not, then it's a great time to do it, but obviously you want to get into work as quickly as possible. In terms of a career path, you go in at sort of a junior level, and at that point you'll be picking up a little bit of everything from everyone. So you might be doing some technical drawing and more on the kind of technical side, and then there might be times where you need to assist with the design library and all the sampling and putting things away and tidying things up and sorting. There's so many samples that come and go in a design office that have to be put away by someone, and actually it's taking that time to actually learn about those materials and realizing that yes, you're just putting something away, but what you've got is a tool to learn about and to use and to kind of get to grips with. So using all of that kind of time in the beginning where you don't feel like you're necessarily doing anything particular yet, to learn the foundations of everything, because the next step to move up and towards sort of more of a midweight designer is when you'll start to be handed more your own jobs, you'll manage things a lot more by yourself, and that's when you tend to start to specialize between being more of a technical designer or leaning towards the concept, or what we call sort of an FF&E designer, which is focusing more on the fittings, the furniture, the design concepts, coming up with the ideas, a lot more client facing, and that person directly feeds back into a technical drawer. So the two things start to become separate at that point, but both rely completely on each other to get the job done well. And then up from there again, you specialize still in your same path, but you kind of go more senior. That's when you'll be overseeing the projects completely, feeding down to your midweight, feeding down to your junior, and then beyond that, it's kind of head of design or owning your own company, and it's kind of, that's the path there is. And the more you move up, the more people you have to manage below, the more client facing you'll be directly, and just kind of seeing that process in its entirety rather than a smaller element in the beginning. One of the things I really love about my job is that, as I said before, it's very unpredictable and very changeable. So a typical day for me might start in the office, and one of the kind of realities and the hard realities you kind of learn when you start working is that actually a lot of your day is admin and emails and answering phone calls. So the first hour for me is always kind of that sacred time of catching up on the emails that I didn't answer yesterday, ringing people back, kind of filling in all those bits before any of my meetings start, and then quite often I can have quite a heavy day of meetings, either in the office with clients or on site with the build team, and kind of unusually, like, our meetings can run 5-6 hours long, so it's quite an intensive day before kind of coming back normally towards the end of the day to try and catch up on what I've missed. So it varies from day to day, but a lot of it is client facing, on site, out and about. And then projects wise, we work majority on new build projects. So a client is knocking down an existing house and building a new one. So they are getting us on board right at the beginning of the project. They're normally kind of worried about what they're about to undertake. They've got their architect already on board, a project manager. There's a team starting to build, and we kind of slot into that. And I think out of a lot of the consultants, we work incredibly closely with the client because we're building their home. We want to get to know their day-to-day, how they live, how they function as a family or as a unit, so that the house that we design for them meets those needs. So the process can take up to a kind of couple of years. We can be on one job with the client, and so by the end of it, you really feel like you know that family, that couple, and you're building it for them, you're designing it for them. So the projects are very extensive. We're incredibly involved in a lot of the layers of the job, which means, it's important we're in it as early as possible to make sure we capture as much as we can before the build starts on site. We're there from the beginning. Weekly, we'll be walking around site in our hard hats and our high-vis jackets, and then right through to the end where we'll be picking bed linen and Harrods or their tableware and flower arrangements. So it's a very varied job, and one day I'll be in my muddy boots, and the next day I'll be shopping for fine china, but it means that you feel like that house at the end when you walk in, you can own it from every detail, and that's what's really exciting. So we have, in the beginning of a job, we have kind of a set formula of a briefing meeting, and we'll sit down with, ideally, if there's a couple or there's two of them, both of them there, because it's both of their houses and they're both going to be living in it. And so we'll have a sort of 2 or 3 hour meeting where we'll go through room by room in the house, what they might like to see, how they're going to live in it, what their family is like, how many children they've got, how old are their kids, do they have a dog, do they want a nanny living in, and right down to how they're going to use each room, and are they messy, are they not messy, are they practical, what do they want to feel when they walk in their front door. And it's those kind of questions in the beginning that help us to build a foundation of knowledge of who they are as people, how they like to live, and that helps us going forwards. I think the difficult part is with a lot of our clients, they've never done this before, and so what they want in the beginning and what they say in the beginning actually evolves throughout the job. They'll suddenly think, actually no, I do love that now, and they didn't like it before. So it's not linear and they don't stay the same. But I think it's a trust building exercise, especially in the beginning, and making sure that they know we understand them and we want to give them what they're asking for. And if that evolves, then great. Quite often it evolves because we've shown them things they didn't know existed and we've enhanced the project. But it's just making sure that we let them know we're listening to them. We're wanting to give them their home and what they want. And although we want to help them to get the best outcome, we're not going to sway them off and manipulate them into doing something that they don't want to do. So it's quite a lengthy process in the beginning, and it takes time to kind of evolve and understand each other, and every client is different. The way they operate as a couple is always different. So the easiest clients are the ones where they have the same vision as a couple, they're very united, and you kind of walk through it seamlessly. But the reality of that is normally quite different. So you've got to deal with the dynamics of two people who are building this house but want different things. How do you get in the middle of that without becoming a marriage counsellor, and just making sure that at the end of the day the house is what they want and not what we're forcing them to have. So I think for me the most exciting part of the project is always the final sort of 2 or 3 weeks when you've got the installation happening and you're suddenly trying to coordinate an entire house of furniture and soft fittings and curtains and lighting, and everything is coming in from all over the world, and you've suddenly got this logistical nightmare of trying to get everything in the right place on the right time at the right setting out and everything, and checking it. Is it damaged? Is it broken? Have we got time to have it replaced? And then you've still got builders doing their snagging and touching up the woodwork, and there's just like a hive of activity on site, and it's so tense and so stressful, and you've got people walking around, you know, shaking that it's not going to be ready. But that point of knowing that's it, this is in the final run, you can see it all coming together. The house that I've walked around 1,000 times in my head looks exactly how I thought it was going to look, and you know that you're about to open the door to the client and they're going to see it, is the most exciting part. And I think it's then when you see everything you've put into it for the last 2 years and every detail you've drawn and redrawn and moved and tweaked and seemed really insignificant, and when you walk in it as a whole you realise it was so important. That's the most satisfying and the best part of the job, definitely. For me, the hardest thing has been the more I've kind of progressed in my job and moved along in the role, and the more responsibility I've got and the more kind of control in some ways, the more removed I have felt at points from the design process. And I think when I have days or maybe weeks where I feel like I've done nothing but admin and emails and answering calls and pushing paper around, I suddenly lose sight of why I'm doing it, and I suddenly feel like I did all this training to be a designer and I'm only answering emails. And I think that at points has been quite a hard reality of actually realising it's not always going to be doing the fun part that you love, and sometimes the further you move along and further you move up, the more you have to do those things, and you're still involved, you're just involved in a different capacity. And so I think it's learning to love email and learning to love phone calls, and actually realising they're the fundamentals that make everything else happen and everything else possible. And if I'm going to manage people well and manage a company well, then I need to accept that I have to free them up to do some of the design work as well. And you can't do it all on your own, and you can't be holding on to it tightly. You have to let things go to be able to do it well for the sake of the project. But I think that's something that takes time to learn, definitely. So as I actually work more on the design FF&E side of things, so I'm not in the technical role. So for me, I liaise a lot internally with the technical designers to make sure they're drawing what I'm creating and what I want them to draw. So internally, there's a lot of communication that happens with them. But then because I'm specifying products, I'm sourcing finishes, tiles, the furniture, everything. There's a lot of interaction that happens with suppliers. So either ringing them, meeting them in the showrooms in London, or them coming to us, and a lot of emails. That takes up a lot of my time, because they're the people that will provide me with the knowledge and the information to be able to do my job well. And then I have a lot of client interaction as well. So meetings in the office, meetings on site, and interacting with them throughout the whole process so that they're fully informed and engaged in the design. And then as a team, we'll form one consultant on a job where there might be sort of 5 or 6 other major consultants. So there'll be an architect and there'll be a civil engineer, there'll be a project manager, there'll be a site manager, and then there'll be more specialist designers like lighting or mechanical and engineering. So all of these people, we have to feed into all of them. And so regularly you're going to be meeting with them on site, figuring out problems. Someone's going to raise an issue. We're going to fight to make sure it looks good, and let them solve the problem. So there's a lot of coordination that has to happen and a lot of teamwork to make sure that the outcome is exactly what we want it to be and that the design isn't compromised because of an electrical issue or a plumbing issue. So there's coordination with that team as well. I really enjoyed school. I really loved the social side of school, and I had a great group of friends, and I think I just enjoyed that kind of daily stimulation of meeting up with people and learning and being in that classroom environment. So I did actually really love it. I think for me, my favourite part was the later years and sixth form, and feeling like you had that bit more independence and yeah, getting to the point where you can cut out the subjects you don't enjoy or you're not good at and focus on the ones you really love. And for me, that was always sort of art, textiles, design, as well as geography. I absolutely love geography, and I did maths, weirdly, for A level. And so, yeah, I think getting to that point where you're doing the subjects that you really love is really important. And I think for me, I chose subjects that I loved rather than necessarily pigeonholing myself into things just for a career. I think I didn't really know necessarily where I was going to end up. So sort of throwing maths into the mix was kind of a good thing to do to keep my options open. But also I did enjoy all the subjects I took, so that helps a lot. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of, unless you want to do something really specific, most of those A levels are going to lead you in the general direction of where you want to go. So I think I'm so glad I didn't worry too much about this is exactly where I'm going to go, so therefore I've got to do X, Y, and Z, because I might have taken a different path or might have chosen different A levels and not enjoyed them quite the way I did. So yeah, I think a big part of it is just choosing stuff that you love and that you're going to be good at. So I would probably tell myself to work a bit harder and to actually not be so laid back. I think I was fortunate enough to find most subjects relatively easy, and I could just kind of walk into exams without worrying too much, which was great. But I think my regret from school is knowing that I could have done so much better than I did, because actually I didn't ever apply myself. I sat back and coasted and kind of let everything wash over me. And so although I didn't worry and get stressed and panic and, find that season of exams really difficult, I know on reflection now, I definitely didn't do as well as I should have done or could have done. And I think for my parents, that was incredibly frustrating to watch. So I would probably just go back and tell myself that it's such a short amount of time, and spending a few hours revising is not the end of the world. So just do it, because it's just an achievement and something to be proud of. And maybe be less laid back. And I think I would tell other people in the position probably the reverse of that, in that your exams aren't everything and your results are not everything, and what you get doesn't define where you go at all. So don't stress about it, don't worry about it, work hard, do your best, but it's not going to define you. So just enjoy it. You're there for such a short amount of time, and when it's gone and you become an adult, life changes a lot. So sit back and enjoy it, because it's such a precious time.